Last year, an interesting incident happened at one of the most elite restaurants. At a corner table sat a simple-looking man wearing a wrinkled shirt and an old watch. The waiter suggested the cheapest item on the menu to him. The people next to him felt sorry for him, and someone sitting nearby whispered, "I wonder how he even got in here." But that man was the owner of the restaurant. And this story is the only truth I want to share with you, because real wealth cannot be seen with the eyes. It doesn't need to be visible. Now I want to ask you a question. If you could hide your wealth today, how would your life change? Would you feel less secure or more? People usually give the wrong answer to this question because, for many years, we've been taught the wrong things. We were taught what wealth looks like, but not what it feels like. We were convinced that expensive cars, luxury watches, and huge villas are success itself. Yet these beliefs are actually one of the biggest traps that keep millions of people away from real wealth. Today, we're going to break that trap. Now think about this. When you go outside, look around you. Expensive cars, luxury bags, the newest smartphones. Do you know what's behind many of them? Very often, credit or installments. Research shows that more than 65% of consumers finance their luxury spending through credit or payment plans. In other words, a large portion of people who appear wealthy on the outside are actually poor and in debt to banks. Now let's get to the real question. What do truly wealthy people do? In 1996, a book called The Millionaire Next Door by Thomas Stanley and William Danko studied American millionaires for years, and the results were quite surprising. More than 80% of millionaires are first-generation wealthy, meaning they didn't inherit their wealth. 57% drive ordinary cars. 89% pay off their credit card balances on time every month. And the most surprising result? Their neighbors don't know they are wealthy. These people are hidden millionaires, silent millionaires. And this is not a coincidence. It's a conscious choice. But why? Why do wealthy people hide it? This is called the silent wealth strategy, and it has 3 major advantages. But first, we must understand this. What is the difference between visible wealth and real wealth? Visible wealth is the money you spend to look rich in the eyes of others. Real wealth is the money you own, but don't spend. The money that grows and eventually sets you free. One imprisons you, the other liberates you. And this is where psychology enters the picture. Why do people spend large amounts of money on status symbols? Research says that when you buy an expensive product, dopamine is activated in your brain, making you feel better, stronger, and more valuable. But is this feeling permanent? In psychology, this is called hedonic adaptation. It means people quickly get used to the new things they acquire, and the happiness they felt when they first bought them disappears. You bought a new car. 3 months later, it's just an old car. You bought a new watch. 6 months later, it's just an ordinary object. Over time, the brain wants more. It becomes an endless cycle, an endless race, and in this race, there are losers, but there are no winners. Now stop and think, why do we make these purchases? Research shows that buying status symbols often comes from the desire to attract attention. In other words, you're not spending for yourself, you're spending for others. You're trying to buy people's perception of you with money. And when that happens, something paradoxical occurs. You run away from real freedom. Now let's move on to the 3 major advantages of silent wealth, because these are not simple theories. They are real truths that can fundamentally change your life. The first is security. When you look wealthy, you become a target. This is a very simple fact, but most people ignore it. Financial scammers, fake investment opportunities, and strangers who suddenly want to partner with you become far more likely to approach you. But when people assume you're not wealthy, these approaches decrease significantly. Remember, real money moves silently. The second is negotiating power. This is rarely talked about, but it's one of the strongest advantages. When the person in front of you senses that you're wealthy, the way they price things changes. But when they see you as an ordinary person, their pricing behavior stays the same. When buying a car, during job interviews, in real estate negotiations, even in everyday situations, silent wealth gives you an invisible shield. The famous businessman Warren Buffett has lived in the same modest house and eaten simple meals for decades for one simple reason: I'm not here to spend my money, I'm here to grow it. The third, and perhaps the most important, is genuine people. If you show your wealth, you can never be sure whether people around you love you or your money. But if you appear simple, the people around you will value you for who you are. This is something money cannot buy: real connection, real friendship, and real love. Now we come to the most critical and most measurable part of this topic: opportunity cost. Imagine two people who both earn the same income. The first person buys a luxury car worth $80,000. The second person buys a simple but reliable car for $20,000 and invests the remaining $60,000. If that $60,000 is invested in an index fund that returns an average of 8% annually, what happens after 25 years? Ready? $60,000 grows to approximately $411,000 in 25 years through compound interest. Just one car decision. Just one choice can change your life. A difference of $411,000. And now, imagine dozens of similar decisions throughout your life. People often think, what will I need that money for in 25 years? But remember, people who build wealth on their own usually work relentlessly and invest heavily until they are around 40 to 45 years old. Of course, there are also people who inherit large fortunes from their parents or grandparents. Much of what you see on the internet isn't even real. Exceptions do exist, of course. For example, athletes, musicians, and similar professions. If you want to become wealthy through your own efforts, make sure to watch the video on the card. Silent millionaires know that every luxury expense is actually giving up a piece of their future freedom. And once you accept this truth, you start looking at every expense differently. Now you might be thinking, so should I never spend the money I earn? Am I not supposed to enjoy life? No, that's not what I'm saying. The point here is not to avoid enjoying life. The point is to spend money not to impress others, but on the things that genuinely make you happy. And there is a huge difference between the two. Do you know what real luxury is? Waking up on Monday morning and not being forced to go to work. Being able to go wherever you want, whenever you want. Having the ability to say no. Building a good life for your children in the future. Freeing your family from the need to work endlessly. A hospital bill not hurting you financially. That is luxury. Not the luxury shown by a car, but the luxury provided by your bank account. And now I want to ask you one final question. When you look at the things you own, how many of them truly make you happy, and how many are simply messages to others? Answering that question honestly is the beginning of financial freedom. Because real success is no longer measured by the things you can afford to buy. Real success is measured by the things you are no longer forced to buy. And if you, watching this video today, can see this difference, it means you've seen something that most people never realize in their entire lifetime. Now, I want to give you a small assignment. When you go home today, look at the expenses you made in the last 3 months and ask yourself this question: did I make this purchase for myself or for others? The answer might surprise you, and that surprise is the beginning of change.